my great privilege to welcome Dennis Prager. What an interesting man he is. Yeah. And I'm reminded when D.L. Moody came to England as a black preacher that welcomed him, and he says, we've had some high-ranking men here before, but today we got the rankest. Now here is the founder of our Rock of Africa mission, and this is Dr. Glenn McGill. So I give it to you.
I got the mic. Well, good morning. This is a real treat. Dennis is a great friend, and not only is he a great friend and a great man, but we're here to discuss a great subject. It's Israel. For I will take you among the nations and gather you out of all countries and will bring you to your own land. This came from Ezekiel, maybe some 2,500 years ago. It was prophesied that people would travel to Israel, and Israel would be a nation again, and the Jew would return to Jerusalem. In 1857, there was a dialogue between a pastor and a teacher, and I read this correspondence back and forth. And the teacher was challenging the pastor at the possibility that Israel would one day be a nation. And he said, do you expect me to believe that the Jewish people that have been scattered throughout the earth, living in cities with great agriculture available and great conveniences, are going to just one day travel all the way back across the world to a land full of dust and rocks? In the 1850s, that was what Israel looked like. And it looked like a pretty impossible prophecy. But the pastor said, I know it sounds unbelievable. I know it sounds almost impossible. And there's a tendency sometime to underestimate God. And maybe we'll figure, well, he was trying to say this. He really wasn't going to do that because it seems so fantastic. I wish they could have been alive in 1948 to see that happen. I wish. Because God did a miracle. And Israel is a miracle against all odds. What would be the odds of that happening? In Zechariah, the prophecy that the Jews will return to Jerusalem, which did come true again in 1967. Isaiah 53, the desert shall become like the Garden of Eden. Remember in the 1850s it was dust and rocks. Today, Israel is a food source for many countries. In the last century, over 200 million trees have been planted there. Israel has returned to the Garden of Eden. And then the prophecy that the Jews would stream from the far corners of the earth. In Isaiah 43, from the east, from the west, from the north, from the south. And we witnessed this. Now, I was born in 1952, and sadly, I've always known an Israel. And I think it's lost its luster. It's that we don't realize the amazing miracle this is. We've come to take it for granted. We think, well, it's a democracy around all these almost barbaric nations. It's this one little oasis. But it is so much more than that. It is a miracle against overwhelming odds. In 2009, I was attending a celebration of the State of Israel in Washington, D.C. at the Grand Hyatt Hotel, very near the White House in Washington. It was the 61st birthday of Israel. It was a wonderful celebration. We had members of the Knesset there. And I ran into a fellow by the name of Rabbi Shmuley Botak. I don't know if you know him. You probably recognize his face. I recognized his face, didn't know his name. Who would remember Shmuley, you know? But I saw him and I said, Rabbi. He says, and we were having a Christian celebration. He was at the AIPAC celebration next door. And he said, what's this? He said, we're celebrating Israel's birthday. Come on in. And we talked a bit, and his kids came in. And, I was a preacher's kid when I was young, and I said to his kids, oh, boy, isn't it great to be a rabbi's kid? You're not expected to be the best and do everything perfectly, are you? But we spent an afternoon just having fun, laughing and joking with the family. And by the end of the day, Shmuley said to me, you know what he had heard about Africa and our work in Africa. And he said, you know what I love about you and my Christian friends? Is you're so focused on others. He says, you serve and you help others. And I said, I want my kids to know that. He said, could I go with you on one of your outreaches to Africa and bring my kids? He says, I know it's a Christian thing and it would be okay. I said, well, sure, let's figure it out. Now, Rabbi Shmuley is an author. You might remember him from the host. He was the host of TLC's Shalom in the Home. He was a frequent guest on Oprah. Shalom in the Home. Yeah, he's a relationship expert. He cares a lot about marriage and family. He has authored more than 30 books. He has Kosher Love, Kosher Marriage, Kosher Sex, Kosher Sutra, Kosher Lust, because loving your wife is just not enough. But he's a remarkable man. He was, for 13 years, he was the rabbi at Oxford University. And the Jerusalem Post counts him among the 50 most influential Jews in the world. Not rabbis, Jews. People like Netanyahu, Steven Spielberg, Zuckerberg. There are 3 rabbis on that list. 2 are from America, 1 from England. That says something about the influence of Rabbi Shmuley. So we developed a friendship. We made a plan to go to our Thanksgiving outreach. And then one day I was in New York, in the New York area, and I dropped in the synagogue while he was speaking, surprised him, and we went back to the house and talked. Now, Rabbi Shmuley is a Republican. He ran for Congress, and I agree with him on many things, but there's some things I disagree with him. And we were debating something that evening, late, and I said, do you know Dennis Prager? And he says, do I know Dennis Prager? He says, he's one of my closest friends. He's been my mentor for more than 20 years. So he said, in fact, he should come with us to Africa. So he gets his cell phone. Hey, Dennis, listen, I've got a guy here, Glenn McGill. We're going to Africa. We're going to distribute seed and mosquito nets. He says, why don't you come with us? You should come. Here he is. And hands me the phone. That's how I met Dennis. Now, interestingly, you see God in all of this. I had just met Dennis's brother 3 weeks earlier than that. I was at a fundraiser for a hospital. A friend of mine was the keynote speaker for a fundraiser for a hospital in Netanya, Israel. And so he talked me into coming along with him. And I heard when Dennis's brother got up to speak, I didn't have to ask him if he was related to Dennis. He sounds just like him. That's what I said. I don't have to ask you if you're related to him. I just want to know how. And he said he was my brother. So that was kind of an interesting connection. I feel like the seeds planted that God was doing something special. And so we end up going to Africa. Dennis comes along. We go to Africa. He brought his son. Rabbi Shmuley brought his daughter. We had a great little trip in Africa. And it was a tremendous time. Now, we hand out seed so people can plant. They can provide for their families for a season. We give a bag of seed. Imagine, instead of giving food, if they can produce their own food, it's everything. So we give us a bag of seed, 2 mosquito nets, so malaria is a big problem. 1 out of every 5 children born in this region will die before age 5 because of mosquito bites. It's just a very big problem because of malaria. So we hand out a seed, mosquito nets, and we also give out Bibles. Now, here I am traveling with arguably the 2 most influential religious Jews in media. And I defy you to say, is there anyone else that you could, who really are that, serious about their faith? And here they are traveling as missionaries, Christian missionaries on an outreach. It's amazing. So now we prepared everything kosher. We were very serious about making them feel at home. They were friends, and they're just two wonderful people. And so we prepared kosher meals the whole time. We had to learn. We had a lot to learn. We bought new utensils. We did everything just to make them feel at home. But then the outreach day came, and we were distributing seed mosquito nets, and I thought, what am I going to do about the Bibles? We're going to hand out Bibles also. Do I ask them to hand out Bibles? Do I not bring it up? I didn't know what to do. And so Shmuley and I were standing under the trees. We were distributing relief supplies, dinner like that. We have a big feast underneath these giant trees. All the villagers come out, and the village chief there leads the meeting. And the guys bring the Bibles out and drop the Bibles in the boxes right in front of me. And then Shmuley says, "Are those the Bibles?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Hey, give me one, give me one." He takes one, puts his arm around me. I don't know if you'll see a picture coming up. He puts his arm around me and holds up the Bible and says to his daughter, "Take a photo." He is a columnist in the Jerusalem Post and the Huffington Post, and he used that photograph in his articles writing about this outreach. Well, I was very impacted. He handed them to Dennis, and Dennis started giving them out, and it was just unbelievable to me. And I just felt the hand of God in all of this. There's Dennis with his Bible. So that evening, we gathered around, I think you'll see a photograph of us gathering around under the stars, around a big table. We had another kosher meal. And as we sat down to start the dinner, I said, "Guys, I just have to share something before we start. You see, I didn't know really how to handle this, with the Bibles. And you guys are friends. I didn't want to put anyone on the spot. I love you guys. But Shmuley, when you took the Bibles and just started handing them out, held them up and took a picture, I said it almost took my breath away. I couldn't believe it. And I just want you to know it was a big deal. It was a big deal." So Dennis looks over to me and says, "Glenn, you have no idea what a big deal that was." Well, I see Israel as a miracle, And I hope that you can share with all your friends as we hear more tonight. Help your friends never to forget. Israel is the hand of God. It's so much more than another country. It is so much more. Yeah, that's it. But it's not the only miracle he's doing, because I think we're witnessing part of this tonight. Dennis doesn't like to get up on a Sunday morning. This is his day to sleep in. The Sabbath is Saturday. And he made a big exception for us. And I am so grateful. And it's my great honor to introduce my great friend, Dennis Prager.
I thought it was put on in my pocket. Hi, everybody. Good morning. He was right, Glenn. I get up early Saturday morning to go to synagogue, so you got to give me a break. I need one day to sign. And I came back from Jerusalem on Friday. But it's okay. I'm totally rested. I'm totally excited. I am. And I'm very excited to be here. So I will tell you a little about Glenn later, because he's a very, very extraordinary man. It's an honor to be at Mariners. Thank you for your Bible Study Society for having me. It's a big deal to me. That's why I said yes. Although the truth is, I say yes when Glenn asks anything. And that was a witness. Come to Zimbabwe. Fine. Okay. Actually, it was a little misleading. He said, "We'll give out your book." And lo and behold, it's giving out Bibles. But that's a better book. I fully acknowledge that. So it was quite something. I'll tell you about it later. I'm still moved because I just spent 10 days in Israel with 450 listeners. And Israelis were so grateful for bringing so many people. 400 of them were not Jewish. The overwhelming majority of them were Christian. And the reception was so beautiful because it's, again, a time of terror in Israel. And people are afraid to go. Although after Paris, what's safe exactly? And the truth is you feel very safe when you go to Israel. It was sort of my 25th trip or so. And I've always tried to go during the worst times so as to state we should be here. I do agree, and I wrote this down. I'm trying to memorize it. I should be able to, but I don't have, believe it or not, I don't have a great memory. Israel is civilization's front line in the battle against barbarism. That was stated by Benjamin Netanyahu at the United Nations just 2 months ago. That's exactly right. The Jews have been the front line against barbarism since Abraham. And I don't say it because I'm a Jew. I am very critical of my fellow Jews, most of whom differ with me politically, as you probably can guess. And I'm not a chauvinist. I look at Jewish history, though, and I look at Israel today, and I rationally conclude that there is a divine element in Jewish history. I don't think that there is any other explanation for Israel and for the Jewish people. I don't. If you can give me, and I mean it, if one can give me a rational, secular explanation for what I'm about to explain, then I might accept it. I come to God, I come to the belief in Jewish chosenness, and indeed my love of Christians, from a totally rational place. And by the way, that's the reason I think I can be persuasive on behalf of God and religion, because I only offer reason. And if you're a listener to my show, you may have heard one of the most touching things to me is when a listener will call me and say, Dennis, it's a little strange and people find it odd, but I got to tell you, it's because of you that I've gone back to church. And my friends, my Christian friends say, really? You came back to church because of a Jew? And he said, I try to explain to them, and I tell them, and it's God's honest truth, I am thrilled. And by the way, it's worth explaining, before I get into the Jews, let me get into the Christians for a moment. Why am I a Jew, a believing religious Jew? Why am I excited if somebody goes back to church because they heard me? Wouldn't I want them to convert to Judaism? And a lot of Christians ask me that. If you believe in Judaism, why are you so happy if people go to church? And that is because I have come to believe many years ago, that when Christians do Christianity right, and God knows that's not always the case, any more than Jews do Judaism right. But when Christians do Christianity right, you are doing God's work. From my perspective, you are bringing humanity to my God, to my Torah. How could that not be great? How could I not see you as my ally in doing God's work on earth? And that's how I view you. And so that's why I am delighted when a guy calls me or a woman calls me to say they've gone back to church after listening to me on the radio make the rational case for God and the Bible and so on. It makes perfect sense. By the way, this is a very big deal about Christians doing Christianity right, and the fault line is very often on how they see Jews. How does a Christian see Jews is a fault line, just as how a secular person sees Israel and the Jews is a fault line. It is an amazing thing what God has in effect done with this tiny, tiny people. And it turns out that the statement, I will bless those who bless you and curse those who curse you, is true. That's what's amazing. You can be an atheist and acknowledge that those who bless the Jews are blessed and those who curse the Jews are cursed. It's been true historically. When Spain more or less blessed its Jews, it was the premier power of Europe. It kicked its Jews out and went into a 500-year decline. Just to give you one example. But the examples are legion. In the world today, what country has blessed the Jews the most? The United States of America. What has been the most blessed country? The United States of America. You could say it's a coincidence. I don't believe it's a coincidence. In fact, I have this terrible statement to make that should it ever happen that America abandon Israel and the Jews, that you can mark that day as the beginning of the decline of the United States of America. Likewise, what is the civilization that most, as it were, curses the Jews? Arab civilization. Arab civilization is the most benighted civilization in the world today. It is cursed. Syria, Iraq, North Africa, Egypt, ISIL, ISIS, Al-Qaeda. I mean, right? And let me tell you this, on the day that the Arab world ceases cursing Israel, that will mark the beginning of its ascent. It will change its course. But right now, the food of the Arab world is Israel hatred. That is, it's the air of the Arab world. That's what it drinks. The leading song at the Arab music festival in Morocco 2 years ago was "I Hate Israel." That was the leading song because it's the most popular song in Egypt. If a Palestinian slaughters a Jew, if you stab a Jewish baby, you are honored in the Palestinian Authority. You're honored. Okay? What more needs to be said? Israel is this front line. Israel is the moral litmus test. There is a phenomenal book by a great non-Jew who's a Christian but a phenomenal economist and thinker, George Gilder. George Gilder is one of the 10 men who most influenced me in my life. And I read him in college. And on nothing religious. I didn't even know he was religious. I read him on male nature. Sexual Suicide was the name of his book. It was unbelievably important to me. And he has written a book called The Israel Test. And his thesis is very simple. See how somebody reacts to Israel and you know all you need to know about them. You know their views, you know their character, you know their outlook, you know their philosophy of life. Does someone resent those who have turned a desert into one of the most dynamic places on earth? Or do they bless it? Do they say, wow, let's be like that? Or do they resent it? And that has been the case for attitude towards Jews historically. I tell the story often, it's not a story, I tell an imaginary story of an extraterrestrial being sent to Earth to report on what's happening on the planet that has intelligent life. So what would you do if you were sent by an extraterrestrial place? You'd go to the United Nations, right? That's where all of the Earth's people meet, or at least their representatives. And so the person would go and they would read the newspapers and watch television, and they would go back and report major concern on Earth are Jews and the Jewish state, Israel. Then the people who sent them would look it up in some extraterrestrial Google, and they would find that of the 7 billion people on Earth, there were 13 million Jews, about 1% of humanity, and that Israel was the size of the American state of New Jersey and smaller than the Central American country of El Salvador. This person would never be sent on another reconnaissance mission. Not person, this extraterrestrial. They would think that he was out of his mind. That's what they're preoccupied with, one of the smallest peoples on Earth. Do you know, folks, that there are more reporters in Israel than anywhere on earth except the United States and Brussels, because the EU is located there? It goes Washington, New York, in other words, US, Europe, Israel. Israel has 7 million people. Israel is the size of New Jersey, as I said. Has the third greatest number of reporters on earth. None of this makes sense. None of it makes sense. Why did Hitler want to destroy the Jews? We take it for granted that the Nazis wanted to annihilate Jewry, right? We just know that. But nobody asks why. Do you know that Hitler was more concerned with annihilating Jewry than in winning World War II? Wherever there was a competition between resources for the Wehrmacht, the German army, or resources to ship Jews to concentration camps, the latter won. It was more important to Hitler to exterminate Jewry than win World War II. Read Lucy Davidowitz's, the great late historian's book, The War Against the Jews, and now she inaugurated that understanding, and now it's commonplace. Why? And by the way, just parenthetically, in that sense, Hitler did win the war. Hitler did annihilate, essentially, European Jewry. It's funny when we say he lost. He didn't lose the war he cared about. The war he cared about was annihilating Jews. He won that one. Didn't annihilate all Jews, obviously, but 9/10 of the occupied area by the Nazis is pretty much annihilation. Why did he want to do that? Why does evil focus on Jews? Evil focuses on the Jews first, and this is what I tell non-Jews all the time, and on the good non-Jew next. The non-Jew who dismisses Jew hatred as the Jew's problem is, forgive me, an idiot. An idiot on purely selfish grounds. You're next. That's why. We are the miner's canary of the world. The miners take canaries down to the mine. There are noxious fumes. The canary dies. The miner knows. You fight the noxious fumes, right? Now, what happens? What if the miner says, look, the canary died? That's the canary's problem. That's what the world did with Hitler. Hitler was the Jews' problem. Palestinian terror was the Jews' problem. The whole world dismissed it as Israel's problem when suicide bombing started in Israel, when kids were blown up at discos in Tel Aviv and at pizzerias in Jerusalem. That's Israel's problem. It's the Jews' problem. Now, it seems to be everybody's problem, isn't it? Because it was so stupidly dismissed as the Jews' problem. Gee, they build settlements. This is what you learned at Harvard. This is what you learned at UCLA, not to mention UC Irvine, at the forefront of dismissing Israel as an apartheid state. I'll talk about that in a moment, the apartheid. This campus is really shameful. And this is the way it is taught. Oh, Israel built settlements. What happened before Israel built settlements? How many times did the Arab world try to destroy Israel before there was one settlement? Before 1967. And do you know that 3 prime ministers of Israel offered a Palestinian state with between 93% and 97% of Palestinian land given to a Palestinian state? 3. Yitzhak Rabin, Ehud Olmert, and Ehud Barak. And in each case, Israel got bombed because of it. Because the Palestinians don't want to make peace with Israel. They say the Palestinians want peace. It is true. They want peace without Israel. It's very important to understand that. But John Kerry doesn't understand this. Barack Obama doesn't understand it. UCLA doesn't understand it. UC Irvine doesn't understand it. In the history of the world, when has a free country wanted war and the police state want peace? It has never happened in the world's history. The only exception is supposedly Israel, the only free state to prefer war over peace. And the only police state to prefer peace over war is the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. I debated at Oxford exactly a year ago. It's on YouTube. It's gone viral in the last 2 weeks. It's out of nowhere. It was dead and then all of a sudden appeared. Now there are hundreds of thousands of views. And it was a debate. You know what the debate was? Is Israel or Hamas the greater obstacle to peace? And I said to them, I said, I feel like I'm in some sort of strange place. Was there a debate at Oxford in the 1930s? Who was the greater obstacle to peace? Nazi Germany or Britain? It would be the same thing. And guess who won? They won. 400 Oxford students, 250 to 150, voted that Israel was the greater obstacle to peace than Hamas. Okay? This is, now you want to know why Europe is in decline? That's why. You want to know why the universities are in decline? Just watch how they look at Israel. Apartheid state, listen to this. If you are an avid listener to my show, and I don't expect that you are, but if you are, you heard last week my broadcasts from Israel. Were you just saying yes? Oh, thank you so much. That's the 6th row, 2nd seat. God bless her. Last week I had, among other guests in Israel on the show, I had an Arab Israeli young woman. Bright, articulate, she was terrific. Again, Arab Israeli Muslim, okay? Citizen of Israel. There are a quarter of the state. People don't realize this. A quarter of Israel is Arab. The apartheid state, right? So Israel appointed her 2 years ago. The United Nations came up with the idea. Every delegation in the world should have one member under 30 this year. So she was chosen. A non-Jew Arab Israeli was chosen. And by the way, she's not exactly all accepting. She doesn't even sing the national anthem. I asked her, do you sing Hatikva, the national anthem of Israel? She said, I can't because of the lyric. It said that the soul of the Jew yearns to return here. I'm not a Jew. So just want you to know this is not a yes woman. But she loves Israel because she knows how much freer she is than in any Arab Muslim country. The freest Arabs in the world live in Israel. You think anybody at UC Irvine, you think one professor has said that? Where it's a trick question. Where are the freest Arabs in the Middle East? Answer, Israel. So she's a member of the delegation. She said to me she was amazed. Delegates, other young delegates, and when she goes to Europe, she is constantly asked, how could you possibly represent Israel? You're not even allowed to vote. And she looks at them, who told you that? Who told you that lie? Of course Arab Israelis vote. Arab Israelis have the same rights as Jewish Israelis. The European intellectual elite believe, and I bet you half the professors in Middle East studies at this university here believe that Arabs don't have the vote. Oh, that's the reason they call it an apartheid state. That's the reason. As an example, because just like blacks couldn't vote in South Africa under apartheid, so too Arabs can't vote, but they do vote. They have their own parties in Knesset. One of the Supreme Court justices is an Arab. People don't know this, the lies that are spread about Israel, but she was dazzled by this. People ask me, how can you represent Israel when you don't even have the vote? You know what they were talking about. At Prager University, that institution we started, that has 40 million views this year. It's the largest maker of videos. Thank you. Every week we come out with a video. One of the videos is by a black African member of the South African Parliament who has been to Israel, and he gives this 5-minute, all the courses are 5 minutes. He gives this 5-minute course on how disgusted he is as a black South African that Israel is called an apartheid state, because all it does is cheapen the evil of apartheid. As a black, he is disgusted. Apartheid state. Jimmy Carter calls it an apartheid state. This is a decline in America. I would say 90% of you agree with me, we're in decline. It is not coincidental. It is not the only factor, but it is not coincidental about the way the elites look at Israel. It's just extraordinary. The people who hate Israel hate the West, hate Christians, hate Jews. There was a motto a while back, first the Saturday people, then the Sunday people. Jews are the Saturday people, Christians are the Sunday people. But you know who got it worse? The Sunday people. Christians have been obliterated now. The most ancient Christian communities in the world, obliterated by Islamists. And you know what there is in the world about that? Crickets. That's what we hear, crickets. One Palestinian is killed, and it's the front page of the New York Times. Entire Christian communities wiped out. You're lucky if it's on page B36. And by the way, I will say this. I am saddened by the Christian response. Why aren't 1 million Christians at a gathering in Washington? I don't know. I mean it. It's not a rhetorical question. I want to know why is that not happening? You have to speak up. If Christians don't speak up for Christians, who will? So that's what's happening. This is the enemies of the Jews. And I look at all of this, and I look at the centrality of the Jews in history, and I look at the fact that evil concentrates on the Jews. I look at the unbelievable role Israel plays in the world. The American Jewish Committee, to its great credit, had an ad in the Wall Street Journal. And it was a full-page ad, and it said, "The United Nations," that was the title. And on one side was every nation in the UN, and on the other side, Israel. It's depressing. Why is that? Imagine now, let me ask you something. Imagine if they gave the same ad, some group, and it was all the nations of the world on this side, and then on this side, it said Cameroon. It's a West African country, which I happen to have visited, by the way. And you'd say, whoo, what's with Cameroon? Right? All of a sudden, Cameroon would take on status. But you would first say, what? But nobody said what to that ad. We take it for granted that this tiny people in this tiny country are central to human events. Why? This is what I mean. Reason has brought me to the conclusion that the Jews, whether they like it or not, and by the way, we often don't like it, are the chosen people. That's just the way it is. God chose the Jews. Tevye in Fiddler on the Roof has this famous plea to God, why don't you choose somebody else? And by the way, maybe this is an open secret that non-Jews don't know. We often say that. You know, not that I want to curse any other group, but, you know, take the Paraguayans for a year. Give them chosenness for a century. Well, we'll then come back to us. It's been a terrible price to be the chosen people. Terrible price. But there's no other explanation for Jewish history and the centrality of Israel. What is the only other? Is it a particularly evil people? What have we done exactly that's bad? I mean, think about it. Yes, a lot of Jews are screwed up politically, but they're not evil. They are. It's a fact. It's a sad fact, okay? But a lot of mainstream Protestants are too, and a lot of Catholics are too, so we're not alone. But it's not exactly running death camps. It's not exactly genocidal people. And, and if your kid doesn't have polio, it was because a Jew gave the Salk vaccine. It's a lot of good came from Jews too. So what is the hatred about? So now let me tell you how Jews understand, Jewish Jews, not Irvine's Jews. No, it's not an insult. UC Irvine's Jews, like any university's Jews, are not particularly Jewish Jews. They are secular Jews. I'm not saying they're not Jewish. Of course they're Jewish. You can't be kicked out any more than you're not kicked out of the American people no matter what views you have. You're not kicked out of the Jewish people no matter what views you have. But it was an academic, Isaac Deutscher, who came up with the term non-Jewish Jew. Person who was born a Jew but who has no specific affiliation, certainly no religious affiliation with Jews. Anyway, how did the Jewish Jews, how did the rabbis of the Talmud, the second holiest work in Judaism, understand anti-Semitism? Now let me tell you a thing about the Talmud. The Talmud is as big as the Encyclopedia Britannica. It's in Aramaic. It's an extremely involved work. It's law and legend and philosophy and goofy stories and brilliant stories. It's an unbelievable work. And again, the size of the Encyclopedia Britannica. So then, I studied it starting 6th grade in yeshiva, Jewish religious school, where rabbis study and then they keep going on. I went on through the beginning of college. And I remember one year in 6th grade, the chapters it's called the tractate volume of Talmud, was on one subject. This gives you an idea of why some take to Talmud and some don't. I was in the latter category. It was on the question of if an egg is laid on a Jewish holy day, can you eat it? Now, with great respect to my ancestors, I didn't care. There was always a heretic in me, and I went a little crazy in 6th grade during Talmud class. That is when I learned to say English words backwards. What I would do during class, because I was bored out of my mind, was I would read all the English signs in the classroom on the wall backwards. And to this day, I can tell you English words backwards. It is useless. It is a completely useless ability. It makes people laugh the first 5 words, and then they move on with their lives. But I did come up with some winners, like Republican backwards is Knackle-booper. And I thought that was awesome. It cheered me up every day when I went into class. I would just say Knackle-booper and life was good. But anyway, the only reason I mention this to you is that the Talmud spends chapters on the question, and it's not silly within the world of taking holiness seriously and so on. Anyway, but I wasn't interested. And I blame me, not the Talmud, but in any event, the reason for my telling you this is, you would think that a series of books that devotes that much time to the question of whether you can eat an egg born on a Yom Tov, on a Jewish holy day, would devote volumes to the question of why are we Jews hated? But they don't. They devote 2 lines in, I think, the whole Talmud. Because it was obvious. And this was the answer that Judaism gave. The word in Hebrew for hatred is sin'ah. The word for Sinai, as in Mount Sinai, in Hebrew is Sinai. The Sinah and Sinai sound identical, virtually identical. This was their brilliant play on words. The great hatred, the great sin'ah, comes from Sinai, from Sinai. The day the Jews were given the 10 Commandments began Jew hatred. That is the view of Judaism. That is my view. We explain it, my co-author and I, in our book, Why the Jews? The Reason for Anti-Semitism. It is not economic. That is a post-Marx nonsense. Poor Jews are as hated as rich Jews. Communist Jews are as hated as much as capitalist Jews. It has nothing whatsoever to do with economics. It has nothing to do with scapegoating. This is the most common. Most Jews believed Jews were scapegoats. Hitler used the Jews as scapegoats. There is no historian I know of who believes that. Because the fact is, when Hitler ran for office in 1933, he actually suppressed Nazi anti-Semitism because he wanted to win more German votes. It's the opposite of using the Jews as a scapegoat. He didn't use the Jews to win the elections. He won the elections to kill the Jews. It's the opposite. It's the opposite of the scapegoat theory. And yet most Jews and non-Jews believe that. He really wanted Jews dead. They were not a political convenience. And by the way, if they were just a political convenience, use them as slave labor. Why annihilate them? There's no point to it. Use them for slaves. No, but it was more important to annihilate them. It was important to exterminate Jewish babies. By the way, Jew hatred is the only annihilationist hatred in all the ethnic hatreds of the world. That is why Israel is the only country on earth targeted for extinction. Think about it. Every country has enemies. But there is no country in the world targeted for extinction except the Jewish country. How many more exceptions do you want before you say there's something different about Jewish history and the Jews? How much more? Thus, the great sinah, the great hatred comes from Sinai, from Sinai. The world did not forgive the Jews, as Edward Flannery, a major Catholic thinker, who wrote a book on anti-Semitism. The world has never forgiven the Jews for bringing this invisible God who demands righteous behavior from all human beings. No civilization before the Jews ever believed that there was a universal God, let alone a universal code of ethics, let alone a universal judgment. If you were Mesopotamian, you weren't judged by a Babylonian god. If you were Babylonian, you weren't judged by a Persian god. Everybody had his own gods. Then the Jews come along and announce, sorry, all your gods are false, there's only one. How's that for how to win friends and influence people? Jews wrote only half of that, how to influence people, but not how to win friends. It's very hard to do both. It's very hard to influence and win friends, especially when the influence is that there is a judging God who demands decent behavior from you, or you will be punished. This is rare stuff. Thou shalt not murder, thou shalt not steal, etc., etc. And then an invisible God to boot, who is creator of the world. All your gods that you made, all your idols are false. Jews smashed the false gods of history. People don't like when their gods are smashed. This is what's happened. By the way, it's not stopped Jews from creating their own false gods in the modern era. You name the ism, except for Nazism, and Jews either founded it or led it. Marxism, socialism, communism, environmentalism, you name it, egalitarianism, Jews. As I always say, people ask me, why are Jews on the left? There's a very simple reason. Jews are the most religious people in the world, but for most of them, their religion is not Judaism. It's environmentalism or feminism or socialism. Bernie Sanders is a perfect example. Perfect example. When the last editor of the New York Times was appointed, the previous to the current one, she announced when she was given the title of managing editor of the New York Times, is a Jewish woman, Jill Abramson, and she announced how honored she was and how overwhelmed, because in her house, the New York Times was the Bible. The second she said it, I spoke about it on the air. Said, this is exactly correct. This woman spoke truth. For many secular Jews and non-Jews, the New York Times is the Bible. That is correct. They care much more about what the editorial page of the New York Times says than what the Torah says. There's no question. By the way, all Subsequent editions of that article removed that quote. But the beauty of the internet is, and the ugliness, it's both. Once it's there, it's there. You can remove it from subsequent editions, but she said it. False gods, that's the whole thing of our time, is false gods. We have more false gods today than they did in Babylon. So, the Jews are hated. This tiny people creates this state, the Jewish state. The place is a marvel. You should see pictures of Tel Aviv 100 years ago. It was either a sand dune or a malarial swamp. Many of the founders died of malaria. You should see it today. It's the third largest stock exchange, I believe, in the world, Israel's. 7 million people. The second most, I believe, patents in the world after the United States. You should see the area where we passed riding on the road last week. I was with my wife, who's here, and with Alan Estrin and his wife. And we passed the whole, their own Silicon Valley. Because so much of the stuff that we use in computers, like the chips of our computers, starts in Israel. Plus the medical inventions. By the way, just as a parenthetical, I do believe that a cure for cancer was lost in the Holocaust. The amount of medical discoveries Jews make and the 6 million murdered, what the world lost is unknowable, but assumable. What the Nazis did against humanity, let alone against the Jews. So you have your choice. The non-Jew has a choice. How do I react to this? The faithful Christian embraces it as simply God's work. Ask an evangelical, and not just evangelicals, but particularly, why do you support Israel and the Jews? You wake them up at 3:30 in the morning. Why do you support Israel and the Jews? Quickly. And they go, God, I will bless those who bless you and curse them, curse you. Can I go back to sleep now? Right? That's right. And they're right. They're absolutely right. That's not the only reason. They also know the difference between good and evil. But that's a big reason, and it's a totally legitimate reason. That's exactly right. And that's the battle. That's a big part of the battle in Christendom today. Exactly the denominations that have lost their way pass resolutions against Israel, like the Presbyterian Church USA. Of all the countries in the world, it has decided to pass a resolution to economically strangle Israel. Israel is the great culprit on earth, the great evildoer. Is it sick? It's just sick. The faithful Presbyterians who write to me, you could almost see the tears in the email. What has happened to their church? And is what has happened to our universities with Israel Apartheid Week, like here at UC Irvine. It's just a grand lie. It's an enormous lie, this apartheid state. And that's why they think that Arabs don't have the vote in Israel. After all, if it's an apartheid state, Israel is the litmus test. And there is no other reason, I believe. I do believe, ultimately, it is chosenness. If I didn't believe in chosenness, I'm not sure I would have stayed a Jew after Auschwitz. I was on a plane once after a speech in Phoenix many, many years ago, something like 25 years ago. I got on the plane in the morning, and a young woman, I'd say about 35, stopped me as I was walking to my seat. And she said, can I speak to you for a moment? Those are the days when they were empty planes. So I sat next to her for a while. She said, I was at your talk last night at the synagogue. I'm a convert to, I don't know if she was a convert or not, but she's married to a Jew. I don't know if she converted. I don't remember. She said, but my husband wouldn't go. My husband is a Jew. He wouldn't go to your talk. He decided, he is the child of Holocaust survivors. He decided he wants to assimilate. and he doesn't want anything to do with being a Jew. Jews have suffered enough. He wants out. By the way, that's not irrational. That is not at all irrational. The only reason to stay a Jew, in my opinion, is because you do believe God chose us. There is no really rational argument to do so. The rational argument is to assimilate. The Holocaust is not an argument to stay Jewish. The Holocaust is an argument to not stay Jewish. After all, there is a belief in Judaism. I know it because it's 1,800 years old, this particular statement in the Passover prayer service, the Haggadah, as it's called. It said in Hebrew, I'll tell it to you in English, in every generation, someone arises to finish us off. The Hebrew is finish us off, to put an end to us. When I was a child and we said it at the Passover Seder, I thought, well, maybe it was true, but it's not true anymore, not after the Holocaust. And now Iran announces daily it wants to destroy Israel. And our government makes a deal with it to enable it to do so. It's really a very, very troubling world, a very troubling world. So that's the story. There is a special place, apparently, in God's plan for this people to whom he made himself known and who the carriers for your tradition leading to the Messiah and the New Testament, etc. All of which is Jewish. I mean, except to the Palestinians. They've announced that Jesus is a Palestinian. That is, I'm not joking. That is the official statement made by Arafat. That is the position. There is no Jewish people. That is the Palestinian argument. The only group with roots in Palestine are Palestinians, which is particularly ironic since there were no Palestinians as such, as a name, until the middle of the 20th century. I'm not knocking them. I believe they exist, but you don't have 4,000 years of roots. The Jews do. We were last week in Ir David, in the city of David. They found seals. They used to seal things when government letters. They found a seal with the names of two utterly obscure officials named in Jeremiah twice in one chapter, and being responsible for throwing Jeremiah into a pit. Those names were never corroborated as having existed until 12 years ago. And they actually found their names. Isn't that mind-boggling? So this is what it means. And so yes, God does bless those who bless the Jews, and curse those who curse them, and the Jews are the chosen people, whether they like it or not. And I mean it whether they like it or not. Do you want to know another great line from the Talmud? Here goes. Beats the egg one, I have to say. It's never got over the egg chapters. But there are some great lines. So here's a great one. God threatened to drop Mount Sinai on the heads of the Jews if they didn't take the 10 Commandments. I think it's awesome. That's one of the only legends I believe. It is. It makes total sense. Hey, listen, let me just ask you. I won't ask you. You're a holy group. I'll ask me. Dennis, if you could have the 10 Commandments from an invisible God or an orgy, that was the choice at Sinai. Okay, I'm not going to tell you which I would have taken, but I know which one I would have taken. It makes perfect sense. That's the human condition. I want 10 commandments and to be judged and have to say no to myself the rest of my life. I have to be faithful to one woman when I can have an orgy. What are you, crazy? That's the joke, by the way. It's a famous Jewish joke. God, when Moses comes down a second time with the tablets, right? Because he broke the first one, seeing what was going on. He says, Jews, Israelites, I have good news and bad news. The good news, I got him down to 10. Right? That's not the punchline. The bad news, adultery stays. That's a Jewish joke. Christians would not tell that joke. Glenn McGill would tell that joke, but he's different. So that's the story. That's our story and your story. And we are in it together. And you have a real battle in Christianity, because there are Christians who believe the New York Times, and there are Christians who believe UC Irvine, and there are Christians who don't believe necessarily the New York Times, but do believe that when it says Jews, it doesn't mean Jews. Like God somehow changed his mind or used a code word. It's one of the saddest aspects of European Christianity, the belief that the Jews were chosen till Jesus and then they stopped being chosen. Paul doesn't say that. It's not even implied in the New Testament, but it became operative for many European Christians. That's why I tell Jews, because Jews had a bad time in Europe. Pre-Hitler, under Christian rule. That's why I tell Jews, never ever confuse American Christians with European Christians. Something special was made in the United States of America. And I want you to know that. The Christians of America are the delight of God. What you have made, what have created in this country, and now are losing, and we are losing this country. But the Christians of America, and you know why? And I believe this as I believe 2 and 2 are 4, because they were Judeo-Christians. The Christians who founded this country were Hebrew-based. That's why the only line on the Liberty Bell is from the Torah, from the 5 books of Moses, from Leviticus. That's why you couldn't get a BA from Harvard till 1800 if you didn't know Hebrew. John Adams spoke Hebrew. These were Judeo-Christians, even Jefferson and Franklin. Not particularly theologically orthodox in their Christianity. Nevertheless, do you know what they wanted the seal of the United States to be? You could see it on the internet. They had an artist draw it. The Jews leaving Egypt. Just as the Jews left Egypt, we left Europe. And guess what is happening in America today? We're going back to Europe. That's it. That's the battle. Do we want the exodus from Europe to remain intact, or do we want to return to Europe? That's in effect the battle. And Europe is secular. Europe is godless. It is the first godless continent in human history. We know of no civilization in history that has been godless. And that's what UC Irvine is. That's why I wrote an essay, you can see it on the internet, How I Found God at Columbia. And with this I'll end. I did. I really did. In the deepest sense of understanding God. It happened at secular Columbia University in graduate school. I was totally flummoxed. I could not understand why brilliant professors taught me nonsense. Nonsense. Like men and women are basically the same. I was taught drivel by brilliant people. I was taught that America and the Soviet Union were essentially morally equivalent. Just capitalism versus communism, 2 economic ways of life. It wasn't freedom versus tyranny. It was capitalism versus communism. I was learning nonsense, and it drove me crazy. And then one day, walking in the square at Columbia, 116th and Broadway, all of a sudden, like the closest I ever had to a theophany, to God appearing before me, I got into my brain a verse that I had said in yeshiva as a child every single day in the morning prayers. But I said it by rote. It never meant anything to me. It was from Proverbs, Reshit Chochmah Yirat Hashem. And that is, wisdom begins with fear of God. And then I realized, That's why I'm learning nonsense here. There's no God here. The most godless institution in the West is the university. And the silliest institution in the West is the university. There is more foolishness at the university than at any other mainstream institution in the Western world. That's why they could vote that Hamas is not the obstacle to peace at Oxford. Godless is wisdomless. This you know and this I know, and that's why we're fighting together for the soul of this country. And that's why we understand the role of Israel and the Jews. God bless you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, thank you. Thank you, thank you. It's very kind of you. So we're going to have time for Q&A, but first I want to tell you about this organization that I am in love with and the reason that I am here today and woke up at 5 a.m. in order to get here. Actually, I didn't, but I just want to make Glenn feel guilty. 4, yes. In fact, I didn't go to bed. All right, so we're hosted this morning by Dr. Bashur and his Bible Study Plus class. Rock of Africa is an outreach organization of World Bible Society. Let me tell you, I went to Africa with him, and I don't want to embarrass him, but I will. I don't want to, but the guy, when he walked through streets in Zimbabwe, I was like walking with a returned Jesus. People look at this man as a savior. The poorest people would just walk over and bless him and thank him. It was overwhelming. He is so good in what this organization does. Is so good. That's why Shmuley and I went. And one of his children, one of my children as well. It was very special to see helping these people both nourish their soul and their body. I've been to 115 countries. I have seen real poverty. This was the biggest poverty I ever saw in my life. Did they ever have a square meal other than when you go there? I don't think so, correct? That's literally the only time. So we're making a Thanksgiving appeal. He goes every Thanksgiving. That's when I went. I went Thanksgiving, was it 2009? Is that when we went? 6 years ago already? Wow. So Thanksgiving morning, you will see email photos of your thank you, Echoing America, if you can give them something. $30 survival kit, that's all. It gives a bag of seed, it feeds a family for a season, 2 mosquito nets, and a Bible from the World Bible Society. Now, let me tell you something. There is a lot Jews can learn from Christians. By the way, one of my all-time favorite speeches, you can get it at the Prager store, and I don't get rich on this, so I have no problem telling you about it. But if you both want to learn and laugh, one of my favorite speeches is what Jews can learn from Christians and Christians can learn from Jews. Because very few people, I'm very blessed, know these communities as well as I do. I am immersed in both. And it's very funny. Some of the differences are just funny. One of them is, we fundraise better than you do. We do. This is how it goes. When I first saw Christians raise funds at a church, I wanted to cry. Whatever the Lord moves you to give, please feel free, however the Spirit moves you. And I go, what? You have to be kidding. Spirit moves me today to give $1. That's a Jewish response. Jews never say that. This is what they do. I saw this. The best fundraising organization in America is the United Jewish Appeal. These are all over, the Jewish federations all over America, staggering sums of money every year for Israel and for fellow Jews in America, poor Jews and so on. So this is what they do for the highest givers, people who give like $100,000 or more. I was a speaker one year at their convention. I saw it. They go, Birnbaum, please stand. Birnbaum stands. Birnbaum, we have your tax return. You had a very good year last year. And that's it. The guy's totally embarrassed into giving a ton of money. Thank you, Birnbaum. Schwartz. And then I go to Christians, whatever the Spirit moves you to give. Whoa, no wonder we raise more money. So I want you to think like Jews for a minute and give that way. Did you have a decent year this year? Can you afford $90? Yes, the odds are overwhelming that you can. And I know it just goes to save people's lives. He's right, it is disgraceful that they don't all have mosquito nets. It's a disgrace, the number of Africans who are dying from this stuff. And this is what we believe. That's what we could do, is to do good. So the only question I have is there pink envelopes? Is that right? Okay, so you could put a check. Could they put a credit card number in? Okay, so there's no excuse. Do not give as the Spirit moves you. I'm sorry, I hope that is not heretical. Okay, unless that's more, in which case, whichever is more, that's the better way. So I'm going to take a moment. You take a look at the thing, because the work that he does, it gives you a great name. You know what the greatest mitzvah in Judaism? Mitzvah is good deed. You know what the greatest and commandment? It's the same word. Is when you do good and it brings honor to God. This is what this does. You do this, it brings honor to God, and of course to Christ, because you're doing it as Christians. So they're coming around. I want it to be so heavy that you will have to bend like that, like you just did. It will weigh you down. I would like to have a separate fund to send Glenn business class. Glenn, what do you say? The Glenn Business Class Fund. No? Did you want to say something?
I want to just pray over the offering. This is a very Christian thing we do.
Yeah, I know that. I like that. No, this part I like.
Yeah.
Oh, to whom do they make it? Tell them.
If you want to write a check, that is a self-addressed return envelope. So you can, if you need to send it, you can just mail it in. But
No, who they make it out to?
World Bible Society.
World Bible
World Bible
Society.
Society. Again, we just thank you. I mean, this is a big deal. This man is a great man. I really,
Thank you.
You know, when I first met Rabbi Shmuley, he would say, Jews have so much to learn from Christians, but we have much to learn from Jews. You know, I love some of the traditions. I love just remembering these monumental moments of biblical history when God did something incredible and making it part of your family life. Don't think we can't learn from the Jew. So let's just bow our heads and pray over this offering. Heavenly Father, what an awesome, awesome thrill it is to see your hand in Israel, to see your hand in our lives. And Lord, to see your hand in this friendship with Dennis and what he means to us as a ministry in our organization. Father, we ask you to continue this work. We lean forward into the adventure that you have before us. Father, we ask you for the courage to do the unthinkable, to risk, and to give more than we can imagine. Father, we ask you for that courage to go, to say, to do, and to give in your name. Father, what a great morning it is. We will have some time for question and answers. But Lord, I just want to ask a blessing on this offering and pray it, Lord, in the name of Jesus.